Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everyone, for joining us for this session. This is in the afternoon session, and we have, we have parallel sessions, and I can see that this place is still pretty full, so that shows the tremendous interest on this particular topic. The video you just saw was a little bit of sort of highlighting the challenge in the sector, but also about the global road safety facility that is hosted at the World Bank, and of course working with others. I understand we also have another video, which is much shorter, 1 minute, is about zero vision. Can we show it now? Before we start the panel. Thank you.
So why shouldn't city streets and roads be designed to protect pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers who make mistakes? Preventable traffic crashes kill 1.35 million people and severely injure 50 million more worldwide each year. But this can be changed. The Vision Zero Challenge is a rallying cry to city leaders to save lives by taking bold actions on road safety. Because even one road death or serious injury is unacceptable. Urban leaders around the world are making a difference by taking responsibility for building a safe system. The Vision Zero Challenge is looking for mayors in Latin America and the Caribbean who want to make bold changes to policy, street design, and more to save the lives of their citizens. Join the Vision Zero Challenge and share your success in making cities safe for everyone.
Thank you again. So that's the 1 minute video, and really sort of set the scene for this particular session, which is really looking at the road safety challenge and how global community is facing up this challenge. My name is Guang Chen. I'm the Global Director for Transport at the World Bank. And it's really my pleasure and a privilege to moderate this session. I'm going to come to an brief introduction of our distinguished panelists. But before that, just a couple words to set the scenes for this particular session. For those who are attending this session, obviously I don't need to repeat the challenging number that we're talking about. 1.35 million people die on the road, 50 million people injured in the road, and this is a challenge that we all agree that is something that we have to confront and it's not acceptable. And also highlighting the fact that most of this is happening in low and middle income countries. That's the particular challenge. So we're talking about human loss, we're talking about suffering and grief, and of course, the hard economic losses that are associated with road crashes. Estimates varies, could be from 3% to 5%, 6% of a nation's GDP associated with road crashes. And this is based on evidence has been produced under the Global Road Safety Facility analysis. This session is timely as we are at the end of the decade of action called by the UN at the time when we set up the Sustainable Development Goal. 2020 was the year that when we set the target of halving the global road safety fatality by half. Now, one can argue, are we achieving that? Probably not. But are we totally failing that? Probably not. But those are one of the challenges we're facing. And of course, next month, there's going to be a global ministerial conference in Stockholm. Basically, the global community will come together again, review the sort of progress we'll make, lessons we've learned, and then probably setting a new target by 2030. So I think this particular session is also timely for us to talk about this particular subject. So I think in the morning, in the very session, even though this event is sort of co-organized by the World Bank, but it's not about the World Bank. It's about the mobility, about the transport sector. But of course, since it's being held by the World Bank, so a lot of questions asked what the World Bank is doing in the various challenges we face. So just a few highlights of the things that we're doing on the road safety side. One, obviously, we've been associated with this challenge for many years, but you probably know that the World Bank recently introduced a new environmental and social framework, among which one of the standards that we set out is on road safety. And in response to that, the Global Practice of Transport developed a guidance note in terms of supporting our staffs and also our client in terms of how to meet the particular requirements. Within the transport practice, there's a question about what are we doing in a project that we finance? investment projects. I can assure you all the investment projects, if they involve in road, either in rural area, urban area, inter-rural urban area, we are required to conduct our own analysis, include the cost and benefit from investment on preventing road crashes into the economic evaluation. We develop indicators to measure performance on those projects and all these areas. And moving from this fiscal year, we also develop a road safety assessment tool requiring all projects to carry out such assessments before we can take it forward. So that's just a really quick introduction of the things that we do at the World Bank, but I'm sure we can hear from our colleagues. Let me just briefly introduce our panelists. Jeff Michael is the visiting scholar of the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health, where he pursued a range of research and advocacy on public health and motor vehicle safeties. Lena Nadan is a special secretary of Government of India for the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, responsible for framing policies and development on national highway and expressways. We also have Mr. Bobaya Ayayami, who is the Corps Marshal of the Federal Road Safety Corps, Nigeria's leading agency in road traffic administration and safety management. We also have Mr. JSR Kuti, is the head of Vehicle Attribute and Technical Services and the Engineering Service Research Center of Tata Motors, responsible for definition and delivery of vehicle attributes targets across Tata Motors passenger vehicle. We also have Ms. Kelly Johnson, who directs the Bloomberg Philanthropies Road Safety, Drowning Prevention, and Partnership for Healthy City Programs. And we also have Ernest Lovinston, is the Executive Director of the Fund for Global Health. In his work, he found the 3-Star Coalition, a global organization concerned with global road safeties. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this session. As you can see from the audience, right after lunch, we almost have a full hall here. So really, a lot of people are really keen on this particular discussion. So let me start with, I think the way that we want to run this session is that I'm going to ask a question to each of the panelists, and I'll ask them to give us like 3 minutes of comments or response. And then, because if we have more times, we'll have another round of questions. And we'll try to ask the question related to the area of your work. And then, of course, we try to leave some time for question and answers. So let me start with the first question. I think I just dropped it over here. Did I miss something?
No, you got them all.
I got them all? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Yes, first question, let's go to Jeff. Jeff is going to be, in fact, leading this work in preparation of the, or involved heavily in the preparation of this conference. Let me see. Did I miss something? Yes. I did miss.
I can fill in.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was fortunate to be a part of the academic expert group, which was one of 3 groups involved in the planning of the ministerial conference. And this was a position that any one of you could have filled, and many of you could have done it better than me, but I was part of a group of about a dozen people that developed a set of recommendations, a set of 9 recommendations looking towards the next decade, and sort of formulated them into a kind of a coherent vision. And we're hoping that at this conference, these recommendations can kind of frame the discussion and sort of maybe point toward a path that is capable of achieving the objective by 2030. Just to give you an idea of the vision, you can look at roadsafetysweden.com and see all of the information about the ministerial conference, including the report from the academic expert group. But I'll tell you briefly about it. It doesn't, the vision from my colleagues in the group doesn't replace the strategy of the decade of action that we are now in. It really reinforces that strategy. It reinforces the idea that the 5 pillars of road safety, all of those evidence-based actions that need to be performed in countries around the world, those are essential, as is the safe system approach. And so it, in fact, not only reinforces those ideas, but says we can't do enough of it right now, and that we need what we need for the next decade is a kind of a larger context for road safety activity, and we need a much expanded workforce. And the vision looks toward the Sustainable Development Goals as an opportunity to meet those needs. So that's the sort of the overall message of the academic expert group's report. But please have a look, and we're hoping that this stimulates thought next month at the meeting.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Let's move on, and thanks so much for respecting to that 3 minutes interval, because we really want to be able to get to the second one and also get the audience involved. Next, I want to go to Lena as the Special Secretary of Ministry of Road Transport and Highway in India. And this is in the context of the government in India India, I should say, recently announced the new Motor Vehicle Act. And where do we see the opportunity does this bring to the achieving the target of 2030 SDG goal on road safety?
So as you mentioned, India has passed the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act, and that mandates very, very strong fines and liabilities for violations that can lead to accidents. So far, there was not enough deterrence, and that deterrence has been brought in a big way after the Amendment Act was passed last year. And in continuation to the passing of the Act, those notifications for the fines, for the liability on contractors for pothole maintenance, all of that is being issued on a regular basis. So that is really going to change things insofar as the enforcement aspect is concerned. The other issue that has been taken up in a big way in India is the focus on black spot rectification, because there are places where there is much more incidence of accidents due to some issues of the engineering or due to some issues which have not really been addressed with due analysis. And for that purpose, we have what we call the development of an integrated road accident database. India has 5.2 million kilometers of roads, and only 2% are national highways, but 40% of the accidents take place on the national highways. So this ministry really wants to take a lead. This integrated accident database is to capture the lat long of every accident using a tablet. The tablet, which is going to be with the police personnel, is going to take a real-time photograph and video of the accident spot so that it is uploaded with complete accurate data, GPS and ring fence the data. And then after that, once we do the analysis, we would have a comprehensive policy in place to take care of those site-specific requirements, and wherever required, even a policy-level change in our own standards and specifications. So that is basically the second new initiative that the government of India has done. We've launched this integrated road accident database program, where we would be able to identify who's managing that particular road. Because when we talk about 5.2 million kilometers of roads, not all of them are national highways. Many are state highways, many are village roads, municipal roads. Unless that particular road owning agency is given the responsibility, which is backed by authentic, scientifically mapped data, nothing is going to change. So that is the second step that we've taken. And the third aspect is doing a proper engineering intervention in terms of what are the designs that need to be in place the kind of curves that should be in place, the crash barriers. We saw in this video the kind of crash barriers in Nepal, I think was the video that was shown. So that is very important. We have certain crash barriers in place, but they are not meeting the requirement. So these are the basic issues that we have taken up in the Government of India.
Thank you, Lina. Let me move to Mr. Babuye Oyemi. People said that you direct one of the largest army in tackling road safeties in Nigeria, heading as you call it the Marshal of the Federal Road Safety Corps. So what are the experience that you have in breaking silos? That's one of the challenges in tackling road safeties and work across different sectors on the road safety problem that you face.
Well, thank you very much. For Nigeria, road safety, the government sees it as a very key issue. And in my advocacy at the continental level, we see that the government support plays a major role when it comes to road safety management. And with this in Nigeria, I think we've been able to move forward to a certain level. And from this data first, when you look at the Moscow Declaration, and at that time the fatalities was 1.2, and now we're talking about 1.35. It means that I can say that the level of awareness, data improvement has led to more data being captured. And for Nigeria, we face the same thing. With the government support, the road safety management in the country has been more enhanced, and is a interagency collaboration, and also it's multi-sectoral when you look at all these. With these, we've been able to, at the government level, been able to get the policy framework out. The funding level has been improved upon, and with the support from all the other donor agencies, but it's an agency that is heavily funded by the government, and that has seen a lot of improvement. And we are focused more on the issue of advocacy, education, and enlightenment. Then further to that, we also carry out the road safety audit. Then when I said it's multi-sectoral, the core is involved in the database, the issuance of driver's license, the number plates production, the signages. It's all encompassing in the country, and that is why recently a study is being carried out now to see road safety in Nigeria as a single agency that is working on this. And we believe that even though the targets has not been able to be met in Nigeria and also the global concerns, but the level of awareness that the decade of action has raised cannot be quantified. It has brought about the need for people to save a life, to drive to save a life, for the government to be more responsive towards having government policies that can halt the trend in road traffic crashes. I believe globally and in the country, we're on course.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Oyemi. Let me turn to Mr. Kuti, as a representative of the private sector in this panel. I want to ask you a question: how can the private sector be engaged in delivering road safety outcomes, and what can private sector stakeholders learn from Tata Motors' own experience in developing India's first 5-star vehicles?
So first of all, Kelly, I must thank you and GNCAP, which is the Global NCAP organization, which set up the standards for the new car assessment program for India. Actually, what GNCAP does is they set up standards and encourages manufacturers to pick them up and follow them. We still don't have a full-scale new car assessment program in India, but the government is still a little while away from getting that sorted. A few years ago, when we were analyzing the data, the management of our company were quite alarmed that the rate of accidents was not something that was coming down. It needed attention. And while there are a large number of stakeholders who deal with this question, a very important role of a manufacturer cannot be wished away. And for those of you who know the Tata Group is one of the most respected groups across the world and definitely in India, and is known for a large emphasis on what we do in the social space. And we also end up doing much more than what most other companies would do in that space. So we picked up a theme of getting safety to a country which was not completely used to the concept of safety at cars. So we said, okay, here's a starting point. It was we decided we're going to build certain products which is capable of meeting the world's best standards. Not easy because we were going through the learning curve, but we set our minds to it. Our biggest challenge that we have with reference to safety of products in India in the product domain is that since safety is not priority in a buying decision, it was probably to put in and pack in a safety package which would be respected, which does not raise the cost of the product such that it becomes unsustainable. And the most important thing that we wanted to do was to bring home a concept that it is possible to create a mass market, non-luxury car, which is capable of delivering the best of 5-star safety. And with the Nexon, with the leadership which was guiding us constantly, with the help of Global NCAP, with the help of Bloomberg Charities, we had the country's first 5-star product. And the good news also is, just yesterday, we said, okay, let's see whether we can sustain in this journey. And we said, okay, this is going to be our status strategy of creating very safe products. And we had the second 5-star car, which is to be launched shortly. So in summary, the lesson that we learned is safety can be the privilege of each and every. It just cannot be and should not be the privilege of a few. And the Tata way and the Tata Motors way was to lead this for the country. And so we sit in a positive motion where others will follow. And we hope that safe cars in India is going to be a gold standard for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Kuti. We have time, we'll come back to that, because I'm sure there's a debate about what's the pressure on lowering costs, at the same time maintaining the high safety standard. There's always a friction on that and how you manage that. Let's go to Ms. Kelly Larson, which directs the Bloomberg's philosophy on road safety, which I think you get a lot of emphasis on data in checking public health issues. What do you think the data can help in different stakeholders in tackling this road safety challenge?
Thank you, Guangche. And I think I should start off my remarks by quoting the founder of Bloomberg Philanthropies, which is, "In God we trust, everyone else bring data." I'm sure you're all very familiar with that, and we repeat it every single day. Data really drives all of the work at the foundation, and we fully support the WHO Global Status Report that helps us understand the global toll of road traffic injuries and fatalities. 1.35 million, we all know the data. Other important data points that I didn't see prior to the discussion is that road traffic injuries are the leading cause of death to 5 to 29-year-olds, and it's the 8th leading cause of death globally. That's the primary reason that we are supporting road safety at Bloomberg Philanthropies. Through our work, and I think that through the work of all donors, NGOs, we really need to commit to strengthening data collection and analysis, not only at the national level, but also at the subnational level. Really, we need to prioritize where crashes and injuries and fatalities are occurring, and that's the best way that we're going to meet our goal of 50% reduction in 2030. Without the data, we can't achieve those targets, but also without government commitment. So wonderful to see India and Nigeria here represented on this panel, because we need government commitment to ensure that there is good data, and oftentimes there are not, but as long as there's data and we can commit to strengthening that data, we can work towards achieving our goals. I think also you saw at the subnational level in Accra, Ghana, 75% of fatalities are pedestrians. They developed a pedestrian action plan, implemented that plan, and saw a reduction in pedestrian deaths to less than 60%. So if we're going to meet those goals, if we're going to have the biggest impact, we need to prioritize the activities that are based on what the data tell us. And to end my comment, Mike also says, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So we must measure. Thank you.
Well, we totally agree, and can say more. As you know, we work together in Latin America. We help set up the observatory on road safety. We're now working with African Union in Africa. We're doing that in Asia as well. So totally agree with you. Now let's go to Ernest. Last but not least, Ernest. Well, actually, you have many backgrounds, but now you represent the public health angle. So how do you see the road safety fit into this global public health challenge?
Thanks, Quang. So it used to be, and this drama played out very much here at the World Bank, it used to be that there were two big streams in international development. There were the people who focused on economic growth, and they were very fond of power generation and irrigation and infrastructure of all kinds, definitely including roads. And there were the people who focused on human development, and they were very fond of education programs and health programs. And these two groups didn't necessarily love each other, but everybody knew who they were, which team they were on, kind of thing. And there was some conflict here at the bank, and everybody knows this story. Those days are pretty much gone, or at least they're going, and nowhere more so than in transport. And I just want to talk a little bit about why. Partly, of course, it has to do with cross-cutting issues of climate change, but it also has to do with something Kelly just highlighted, which is the central role of road safety in global public health. So road safety has always been a public health issue, but now it's right in the middle of global health. Road accidents kill more people than HIV. In fact, they're coming up on killing twice as many people. Road accidents already kill more than 3 times as many people as malaria. As Kelly said, they are the leading cause of death of young people ages 5 to 29. So road accidents are not just kind of a thing in public health, they're right in the middle of public health. And that means that transport, road transport, intelligently designed roads and intelligently designed transport policies are, as they always have been, right at the center of economic development and now right at the center of human development. And this is changing the definition and the requirement for what it means to be a road expert, a road transport expert. It requires a new set of knowledge and new set of skills. And I don't want to, how can I put this? I don't want to say too much. I don't want to later on have to apologize for my remarks, but I think I can safely say that the global transport practice here at the bank has really stepped up to this new definition and this new requirement for what it means to be a transport expert. So I think that's definitely a good development. I just want to say one word about cost and cost effectiveness. I think that along with the idea that you need to bring data, you also need to bring smart, affordable solutions. So we at the Fund for Global Health did a calculation, mostly using data from the International Road Assessment Program, IRAP. What would it cost to reduce by half the fatalities in a typical mix of World Bank road projects over a given year? We found that it would cost around 6% of the cost of roads, but the economic benefit cost ratio would be around 9, compared to around 2.4 for the actual road itself. Now, 2.4 is still a great deal. I mean, if you can find an investment that gives you $2.4 for every dollar you put in, that's a good deal, and that's why we need to keep on focusing on roads. But 9 is an even better deal. And so I think the conclusion we drew was, this is something, as was said in the video, that we can't afford not to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernest. Talking about definition, since we're here all expert on road safety, as you know, we have transitioned the definition of road accident into road crash, because we said accident is actually means it's unavoidable, but we are saying this is actually avoidable, preventable. So I'm sure we agree on that one. Thanks very much. I really want to go back to one question, and then personal to me. I've been working in South Asia transport sector for over well, last time over 20 years. I remember distinctively some 17, 18 years ago when Tata Motor first introduced a vehicle called Nano that was advertised to be cost less than $5,000 per vehicle. Obviously, it's meeting the demand of the rising middle income class in India. Of course, at that time, I'm quite sure I'm speculating, but you're the insider. At that time, road safety concern standard probably not as high as today. How do you balance that? You already mentioned that in your first remark, right? Is the sort of affordable vehicles for meeting the need of middle income, rising middle income family, at the same time meeting minimum safety standards. How do you balance the challenge?
So there are two things which are happening in parallel. One is the government has mandated a large number of safety-related norms.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, a common minimum program has been established across all manufacturers. So that's great news. So we have at least stepped up to having the cost differential between different manufacturers being equalized on one platform, which is great. The second is, the management of the company also is constantly recognizing that building a nation is not the responsibility of only a small set of people. If the politicians have a role to do, the bureaucrats have a role to do, the teachers have a role to do, but responsible automakers also have a very important role to play. It's no more a question of either or, it's a question of both. It's a question of and. Now, the question of and is normally associated with this cost versus performance trade-off. And that is an intelligent mix of how much safety to provide and how much cost the consumer is able to bear with. Understanding of the market and understanding of the people whose products, who are the final users of the product, is an absolute key for making this decision. So you can go overboard, because if you take all the safety-related incidents that normally a vehicle goes through in its life cycle, then probably you will probably have to you may have to make a battle tank out of it. But to be able to find the minimum set of criteria on which it can be based, such that you cover a large percentage of the use cases, is the most critical design decision that R&D organizations have to make. And the good news is, I think we got that sweet spot right. So we did not raise the cost, we did not raise the price or the cost of the car. So, in jest, we would normally say, our management would normally, when I was looking after the development of the car, the challenge that I was given is to take it to a 5-star car, from the car that it was. We're not going to allow you the money which is greater than the cost of a meal that a family can afford when he has purchased his car and he's going home. So that was the thing. And when we picked it up further, we said, okay, if you want to take it from 4-star to 5-star, we'll allow you the cost of a Starbucks coffee in a developed market. So we're working with those cost challenges. And the answer to that is intelligence, great amount of simulation, and absolute focus on the outcome is the way forward. So when you set the agenda for the industry, you probably find everybody cooperates and makes it happen. So fortune favors the brave, and sometimes great technology and great intention is automatically an outcome of good practices.
Thank you. And I obviously assume, which I'm sure is a fact, while we're talking about cars, but the same philosophy apply for buses, apply to trucks, that obviously Tata is also producing.
There's a fundamental difference between how do you deal with trucks and how do you deal with cars. In the case of a car, you would normally spend little less effort on prevention. You do all that, but you also deal with, in case an accident has occurred, how do you protect both the occupants inside and the occupants outside, and the people outside, which is pedestrians or cyclists, or all the vulnerable road users. In the case of heavy vehicles, protecting after a crash has occurred is very difficult, because you're dealing with weights and moments and moment of inertia which is greater than 50 tons speeding at about 100 kilometers an hour. So what you do there is to avoid accidents or avoid incidents through collision avoidance, better systems. So there's a trade-off between active and passive. So in the case of heavy vehicles and commercial vehicles, we deal with it differently. In the case of passenger cars, we deal with it differently. each has to have specific solutions catered for that.
Okay, thank you. Now let me ask a question to all the panelists. I think since you engage in this field, one way or other, you probably participating or engage in the preparation of this coming up this Stockholm Global Ministerial Conference. What do you see the sort of opportunities and how or should this conference really set the global agenda on road safety? Perhaps from academics perspective, from philosophical, philanthropists, or from the government's perspective. How do we see this conference coming up? What are the opportunities for us? Anyone, no particular order.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the first thing which I've been raising as regards to this conference is that there ought to be a review of the first decade, 2011 to 2020. We had 5 pillars, and along the 5 continents, what is the scorecard? Because more or less it's a rollover to 2030 SDGs. So what is the performance? How at the global level for the pillar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the road safety management, safer roads, safer vehicles, pedestrians, and post-crash? What are the gaps? It is the gaps I believe should be rolled over to the next level, because we cannot, like you said at the introductory remark, there's been a level of achievement, even if it's just on advocacy, education, and enlightenment alone for the last decade. The level of awareness when it comes to road safety management has really increased. And like Bloomberg said, the issue of data has come to the front burner now, that without the data, you cannot plan, and without the data, you cannot really move forward. So these are the issues, and that the last 3 years now, focus has been more on data administration and management, and that WHO has been fully involved in the last 2 global status reports of WHO. They've dwelt more on the issue of data. Even we've also, in our own context, we've been able to get support from the World Bank in redesigning the templates for data captures in crashes. So these are all the things I believe for the conference. What is the review of the decade first? What are the gaps? Then the uncompleted aspect should be rolled over before you start talking about another issue. It is very critical because we must measure. There must be the KPIs are there. It must be measured. The areas that's not been achieved then is further redeveloped for the next decade.
Okay, thanks. Nina, and I come to you, Jeff.
I would say that we ought to learn about different best practices in similar economies. One size fits all doesn't work. So the developed countries have a different user behavior, they have a different traffic profile, the kind of mixed use traffic that we would find in India, for instance. In urban areas, it's very mixed. You'll have a cyclist going on the same road. You would not probably find it. You have dedicated cycle lanes in many European countries. It's not the case in India. You have a two-wheeler, you could have a bullock cart on the road also. And that's a fact of life. So a conference like Stockholm, I would say, if it can have a segmented approach to the nature and the problem in similar sets of countries, and then have a kind of a template or a suggested route, roadmap rather, which caters to those particular countries with that kind of traffic behavior, that is easily adoptable and adaptable by the countries. Otherwise, we're talking different languages. You know, we're really not relating to the problems of each other because our problems are very different.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. I want to say something about the Sustainable Development Goals again. So there's strong interest in using the opportunity of the Sustainable Development Goals to carry road safety forward, and that is, I think, rooted in recognition that so long as road safety remains sort of a third party, a special interest, we won't have the capacity to affect countries around the world, to affect now close to 2 billion vehicles, and you know, in the face of increasing motorization. So the Sustainable Development Goals offer that opportunity. For us to take advantage of that, the agenda for the conference really has to point in that direction, I think, which is we have to give attention to articulating a compelling case for road safety to be carried along, to be integrated and carried along with the 17 development goals. We have to be able to articulate that case and disseminate it among businesses, among governments who have some obligation, responsibility, and accountability to contribute to those goals. And then we need to provide tools for these people to do road safety work in order to get their primary mission completed. And so we have a lot of work to do, and I think we are at the very beginning of thinking through this strategy, and we need smart people at that conference to begin thinking in this direction. How are we going to get this done? How are we going to get road safety carried in the current of 17 development goals of more than 100 targets?
Thank you. Kelly, you?
My thoughts are a bit more practical. We will not meet the SDG. We didn't in 2020. We're not going to meet the SDGs in 2030 without government commitment. So on the practical side, we have leaders from different countries attending the Stockholm conference. We need to build them up as champions for road safety and, as you say, identify opportunities to help support the work that they can take back to their respective countries and spread that. My other thought, too, is this is the third ministerial conference. What happened after the first two? What did we learn? What progress did we make? And so really making an assessment of how can we build on the lessons learned from the last two ministerial conferences so we can capitalize on the one in Sweden next month.
Well, others may want to comment on this. I wonder if any folks in the audience want to ask our panelists along this area. Any question, please prepare yourself. But just before I go to the audience, anyone have a last comment on this?
Go ahead, please. If you analyze this whole concept of what is an incident and what's an accident, we would normally classify it either as a social problem or an economic problem. And we'd largely connect with a crash or a fatality at a more social and an emotional level rather than economic level. While all the statistics and the GDP numbers and the relationship with GDP is well established, the relationship between the incentive to create a system by which both governments, countries, states, and municipalities and cities are incentivized to move in that direction is absolutely key. So what happens is when we continue to classify it as a social issue, what only comes out of it is emotion, and a positive emotion that we should do something about it. But in order to be practical, in order to make it sustainable, there has to be an economic incentive that is provided to people who are doing very well. Let me tell you why. For example, take the case of the product like what we have made, and we are continuously pursuing that agenda. It's one thing for a group like the Tatas who completely believe in welfare as a primary medium of getting safety to the people. But if there was a method by which there's an incentive, an economic incentive, either through governments, either through something like a green fund, if I may, or a fund which is able to, or where good companies creating great products is able to attract economic support, you suddenly find that that money is chased by a large number of corporations. Products become safer. A similar thing can go to roads and infrastructure. Cities can be, you could probably congratulate them in different forms, both monetary and non-monetary. And then there is a reason why that incentive moves from pure social to also economic. So the Stockholm conference can probably debate this.
Thank you. Ernest?
I completely agree with our colleague from Tata about incentives. I want to talk about one opportunity that presents itself, maybe two, I'll be very fast. One is enforcement, and our colleague from Nigeria had something to say about this. There are very few things in public health where you can go to a finance minister and say, number one, here's an intervention that will first improve the economy. Second, improve public health. Three, so far from costing you anything, will improve revenue. In fact, I can only think of one other thing besides traffic enforcement that does that, and that's tobacco taxes. But, which I think you guys are also working on, yeah. So I'm not endorsing anyone's presidential campaign, by the way. So, but I do think that the issue of improved enforcement represents a real opportunity with an incentive base, as our colleague from Tata was talking about, that could be pursued more vigorously. Second thing I want to say is, again, looking at it from a health perspective, there are very few things in public health we can do that last 20 or 30 years. But when you guys finance a better road or design a better road with a median strip, with properly marked edges, with appropriate speed breakers, you're doing something that will be saving lives and reducing injuries way into the future. And that's one of the reasons why, when I was praising the Global Transport Group here, the Global Transport Practice, it's because of what they've been working on in terms of safe infrastructure. So I just think there's some really strong opportunities in Stockholm, and the question will be, is it going to be one of those things where they just look at everything and it becomes sort of a mishmash, or is it going to be some real focus on results and outcomes? And that, I guess, we'll know pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much with that. Let me go to the audience, and then we'll come back to the panelists. So please introduce yourself and keep your sort of comment and question brief. And if you want to address particular panelists, you can mention it. And I will collect 3 and then come to the panel. Please.
Great. Thank you. Very interesting discussion. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much. My name's Kevin White. I'm the Executive Director of Global Vision 2020. So bit of a paid announcement. I've come up with a system, a way to deliver eyeglasses. Anyone can deliver eyeglasses to anyone, anywhere for less than $5 a person. But if you look at the broader question, if you look at a heat map of where these accidents occur, where the majority of them occur per capita, and you look at the same heat map of health interventions, especially eyeglasses, now their lack thereof, there's almost 100% correlation. So don't you think that it's time that maybe, in the 5 pillars, none of the 5 pillars include vision testing. WHO says you need 20/40 vision in order to see, in order to drive. That's not enforced. It's not available to the majority of people in these countries. Do you think that's something that we should address, and how would you go about addressing that? Okay. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll collect 2 more. I think I want to ask the lady in the back there, because you're the first one. Raise your hand, please. And now I'll come to the panel. Yeah.
Good afternoon. It's a really good discussion, and I work at the Regional Planning Agency in Seattle, Washington, and the reason I bring that up is Washington State was one of the first to adopt like a Target Zero. The Highway Strategic Safety Plan is called Target Zero, which says 0 deaths and fatalities by 2030. And one of the challenges we face as the regional agency, some jurisdictions say Target Zero seems to be it's supposed to be data-driven. It's all about fixing the problem. It seems to place the blame on the victim, and because it doesn't differentiate between pedestrians versus bicyclists, it's about safety for all users. The reason I bring that up is when you were talking about Vision Zero and the fact that Seattle, Washington region is growing, it's diverse, but it's a developed country, right? So when you're talking about a global challenge to safety, how do you balance, should we focus on education, should we focus on engineering? Data tells you a lot, but a lot of times it's politics that drives things. How do you balance these competing, and in an ideal world, maybe I'll put money in everything, but I don't have money. How do you balance all these competing interests is what I wanted to talk about.
Thank you. Maybe one more, and then I'll come to the panel, please. And then, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I'm Jacob Mason. I'm with the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. I also want to thank the panel for lots of really good ideas and interesting discussion. I would like to say that, remind everyone that we're talking about multi-ton pieces of metal that move at very high speeds next to human beings that are walking that don't have any protection, that don't have any airbags or crumple zones or anything. And while there's lots of really good ideas presented, almost all of them seem to be premised on the idea that these machines that we buy can be driven pretty much anywhere, and they all are capable of going at pretty much any speed. So I want to, and related to that, we've seen in the US a proliferation of new modes, such as scooters, many of which are limited on where they can go and capped on the speed at which they can go. So I want to see if any of the panelists have considered speed governors or restrictions on access for these vehicles as a means to more radically address the pressing safety problems that we're seeing. Thank you.
Okay. If you can excuse me, I'll come back to you for the three other waiting to ask question. I want to ask any of our panelists to pick up. You don't have to answer all three of them. You can pick up one of them, and then we can spread out the response, and we have more people. Lena, you want to respond to the vision? Right?
Yeah, the vision. I think that was a very good point. And in fact, we do have these Road Safety Week, which is organized every year. And part of this week is that there are eye tests conducted of all the truckers. So those especially who are, driving, whether it's a long distance or short distance is irrelevant, because one mistake can cost so many lives. So there are these free eye checkups and free glasses which are distributed to the truck drivers. So that is one thing that we are doing, and we are continuing it on a regular basis in India. And the other thing which I wanted to respond to was this, the third question which was just raised about how, how there is this, this balancing between what is going to be the strategy for enforcement vis-a-vis the actual reason for the accident, whether it is the trucker's mistake every time or it is the pedestrian. So when we are talking about this integrated accident database being created, part of it is crash lab investigation. Setting up crash lab investigation systems in India is also something which was not there so far. We are trying to do proper forensic analysis of crashes to understand what was the cause. Is it the victim always? Is it the driver always? Or is it a mix of the factors? And then do data analysis to see the pattern and rectify the problem over a period, rather than keep anguishing about what may have been the reason and wait for the next accident to prove us right or wrong.
Thank you.
I think for the first question, is really right on the issue of vision. There was, in the whole 5 pillars, there was nothing mentioned in respect of that. And like he's saying, there is need for concerted efforts in the next decade to address this. Mm-hmm. Last year in Nigeria, during one of the festive periods, we had a collaboration with the Nigerian Optometrist Association, where randoms on the highways, we stopped the drivers, especially the commercial drivers, and we observed from the numbers stopped, 30% failed the vision test. So it further shows from what he's saying now, there is need to focus and to address in the next decade the issue of sight problems. And again, hardly do you see truck drivers or in general commercial drivers using a pair of glasses, whereas some of them don't have good sight. Mm-hmm. Hardly, because there's this phobia in Nigeria and in some African countries that once we are using glasses, you're out of job. There's need to re-educate the drivers. There's need to check the sight of the drivers. It's not only when you want to get your license that you do the vision acuity test or you bring the medical report. The next decade must address, because from the study we've conducted, we've seen that vision contributes to some of the real fatal crashes. Then the second part on the issue of speed, it's a critical issue that must be addressed also. Speed plays, in Nigeria, 50% of the crashes was a result of speed. So that was why we made it compulsory to have the speed limiting device installed in commercial vehicles. So this is one of the key issues. These two issues still needs to be moved to the next decade and be addressed properly. I think is a good contribution. Let me just stop there.
Thank you. And Jeff,
I just want to add one small thing about eyeglasses. This suggestion is perfect. And in Tata Motors, we get a large number of vehicles which come in for the incoming logistics and what goes out for the outgoing logistics, all carried by heavy commercial vehicles. So there are times when we have this eye check. But you'll be surprised to know that most trucks in India carries 2 people. One is called the driver, and the other gentleman who supports him is called a cleaner. So this is a pair which normally drives trucks in India. And if you were to ask the driver to come for an eye checkup, he will absolutely resist and do everything to prevent himself from being subjected to the eye checkup. And so he will send his cleaner, or he'll find a way to avoid it. And the reason is the owner who employs him will find the first opportunity of getting him out of service the minute he is seen as wearing glasses. Now, it's impossible, therefore, to coax or cajole these gentlemen to wear eyeglasses. So it is a social problem in a very different sense. So how do you deal with this? So we deal with it at least in the sense that if you're younger, you expect that your eyes are still okay, and or the probability of the eye being better is okay. But when you're older, it becomes a little bit more. So there's a lot of coaxing, a lot of cajoling, getting them up to speed, and at times we even go to the extent of speaking to their the owners of the fleets, so that the jobs are protected. So it's easier said than done.
Thank you. So last comment from Jeff, and I want to bring the other question. They were waiting patiently.
Okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to give an endorsement to the question from the audience about speed,
Yes.
and in particular, intelligent speed assistance technology, which is already available and already being implemented in places around the world, not in the U.S. It is a technology which uses global positioning to sense the immediate speed limit in the immediate area of the vehicle, and to either provide a warning to the driver if they're over the speed limit, or in more advanced versions, actually use govern the speed of the vehicle to that maximum speed. And that allows me to sort of segue to the power of procurement, public procurement. Sweden is using the power of their public procurement, that is their government purchase of fleet vehicles, to introduce such technology and both collect data on it and sort of familiarize the public with that technology. That's a very powerful technique, and I think that's one that needs to be discussed in the context of the conference.
You want to comment on this one? Or?
I just want to comment on the speed.
Okay.
Yes,
go ahead.
No, I want to just reinforce that there is no magic bullet to speed, and we need to have a multi-pronged approach. We need strong legislation to limit speeds. We need infrastructure, World Bank, to ensure that highways are not built for speed, that city roads are not built for vehicles, but rather for safe passage for all road users, and technology. So it's probably the biggest killer, speed in road safety, and it's something that we have prioritized in our work at Bloomberg Philanthropies.
Just a quick reaction. Yes, we recognize that, in fact, some of the analytical work that we're partnered with some of our agency are looking at the impact of speed, and also looking at some particular OECD country is actually a recent trend. Some OECD country actually reduce the speed limit in sort of in the city, and what the impact would that be? Now let me go to our audience. They're waiting patiently. Please.
Thank you. My name's Lily Matson. I'm from London. I've really enjoyed the discussion. I just wanted to perhaps widen out the discussion around public health in the view of the Stockholm conference, because I think it's really interesting that we talk about the public health impact in terms of road crashes and death. But there is a wider dynamic when you look at perhaps particularly in developed cities like London, where actually it's fear of accidents, which mean that people don't travel actively. So we have the most obese children in Europe. And the public health consequences of that are over and above all of the consequences of road, terrible consequences of road crashes. So I just have a slight concern in that we'll focus too much on vehicle safety, on controlling speeds, on making roads safe for vehicles, which is where we've made loads of progress in Europe, it's true. But actually, real safety is about making it safe for people to travel by foot and by bike and by public transport, because that will reap the wider public health benefits. And I just wonder what that means both perhaps in developing countries and for the conference, and how we're going to bring out that wider public health discussion.
Thank you. A very valid question. Please, we'll collect, I think we'll collect all of them and then come back to the panel. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm called Arnold and I'm from Cameroon. Having good policy and regulation is one thing, and implementing this policy and regulation streamlessly is another thing. And we've noticed in Cameroon that almost all the time the government tries to implement policy, they fail because, one, they may be corrupt, they may be incompetent, or it may just be an issue of funding or lack of resources. So what is the World Bank and all other organizations going to do in order to ensure that whatever policy is decided can be implemented so it reaches, or that they get the effects they want from these problems?
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Måns Lönnroth. I'm from Sweden. I used to work in the Swedish government when the idea of Vision Zero first came up, and I remember how the minister in question was ridiculed about the whole idea. So now we're here, which I think is great progress. Now, I have two questions. The first is, we are not talking about social class. My guess is that when it comes to unprotected people, it's very much a question of class. My second question concerns, maybe we should divide Vision Zero between different groups. If I would take one group ahead of all others, it would be Vision Zero for children outside cars. I think that would also have an impact on the whole question of the fear of accidents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Teriada Zhong. I work with the World Bank. My question is, if you look back on the decade, basically the two continents which had the least progress were Africa and probably South Asia. And I'm wondering that as we go forward into the next decade, should we, instead of being more global, have a more focused approach towards these continents and look a little bit more into depth into some of the issues around the pillars and see if there's some cultural and there's some country specific issues which will actually help drive the kind of interventions that we are looking at in these countries. So can we use Stockholm as an opportunity to raise awareness, especially at the highest levels with the ministers who are coming, that we need them to focus on what needs to be done. But can we use the decade ahead to fix specifically on these two continents to actually start to see some impacts in the global figures? Thank you.
Thank you, Tavia. Let me turn to panelists. Again, any question you want to pick up? I also received some question online, which I will do the next round. Thank you.
So I wanted to address the issue of fear, and it also comes with the person who wisely said that we pedestrians don't have airbags in crumple zones. And of course, the people most vulnerable are children, as another speaker mentioned. There are a number of very good interventions, very practical interventions, long-lasting interventions that will really make a difference. Separate paths for pedestrians. It's a good example. I mean, any of us who've traveled in developing countries and even many developed countries know that you often see pedestrians walking along the side of a road. There's nothing but a few inches between them and vehicles, multi-ton vehicles going 100 kilometers an hour. A path is a really important thing, but I particularly want to raise the issue of carefully located speed bumps. Speed is king. Speed is the whole deal, as a number of panelists have pointed out. Everything we care about in road safety varies not as the speed, but as the square of the speed. Force of impact varies as the square of the speed. Stopping distance varies as the square of the speed. So slowing down speed is really the key issue, and speed bumps, when they're wisely placed, are a big, big thing. I'll just say one more thing about this. I live in Seattle. There was a speaker from Seattle. My next door neighbor has a little sign on her lawn that says 20 is plenty, because she doesn't like these 30-mile-an-hour cars zooming by when her kids are so close. Then I go to Nigeria, and I'm traveling in a village, through a village, and they've put logs across the road to slow down cars, because they don't like the cars going so fast and trucks going so fast near their children. So whether it's Seattle or rural Nigeria, people have the same desire: slow things down, and we need to listen to that. Thank you.
I think I want to pick the EU from Cameroon. and the issue of Tawe, I think we, at the regional levels, there's urgent need to get the government's commitment towards road safety management. And I've raised this issue at the continental level, like it was saying. Policies, implementations, there's need for a strong will by the government to be able to really see road safety as a real problem. The data is there. Africa accounts for 25% of the fatalities. There's need to address this. Then the second one by Tawe shows that the fatality rate in Africa is the highest among the 5. This is data now. Without data, you can't really talk much. Now, the way forward, the next step is that the 2 continents mentioned, there's need to focus on them to ensure that you bring them to level in terms of increased capacity building, assessment, looking at the gaps, and addressing the problems. The problems are really sectional. Maybe some are problems, some are capacity building, some are even institutional problems, to really address them, to bring them to speed like other continents. That means it requires more engagement for this, especially Africa, to get this. And in Africa, again, you need to get the AUC, that is African Union Commission, to really sit down, to have sessions to really address the issue of road safety. Government commitment is what can give results. Without government commitment in any country, you won't get the desired result. This is very, very critical, because I say it, government commitment and the political will give you 50% of the result. The rest is much easier. If government agrees to set up a lead agency, that means the government will fund it. But if the government shows ineptitude or apathy towards road safety, no matter the donors, no matter what you bring in, you won't get results. Mm-hmm. So that is those are part of the things that must be packaged for the next decade. It's very, very important.
Thank you. Jeff, and then Sue.
Yes, short comment about the active mobility comment. This is very central in the vision proposed for the coming decade. There's a lot of literature about the value of active mobility, and almost all of it is written in terms of comparing risks and benefits. And the general conclusion is that the health benefits of active lifestyles exceed the added risk of walking or biking in traffic. The vision is we can have both. That is, if we succeed in our overall vision of implementing the 5 pillars, reduce speed, safe system approach, we can have active mobility without increased risk. And that's the vision that we need to strive for the next 10 years.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
So one comfort that some of us can take is that automakers across the globe are fundamentally questioning this model of having a 1,000 to 1,200 kilo product required to carry a person who is approximately 100 kilos. So this whole question of the unsustainability of a product which is so heavy, carrying small sets of kilos, is something that we are debating in all auto forums. So if some of us were to attend some of the technical conferences across the globe, these are questions being constantly debated. These are questions being, challenged. And the comfort that we can take is the cars as that we see them today is probably ripe for disruption. It's only a question of time before we probably see a car, the new form or the new substance of a car, which probably will deal with this mass of the car question. And as he correctly said, that while the velocity, the speed is the problem because it's a square, the mass multiplied by the velocity is an equally dangerous proposition. So we are, as automakers, questioning this premise, and in due time, I'm sure we would be seeing products which are dealing with both the velocity and the mass question.
Thank you. Yes, Nina,
I
please.
just respond to what a colleague from Cameroon had mentioned about governments and their commitment to and their ability to stick to whatever they have committed. So that is something which is a key question, because ultimately if the government wants to deliver on something, it will pull out all the stops. The 5 pillars will not remain only on paper, but will actually get implemented on the ground. And for that, even governments need to be incentivized. So in India, we have a federal system, we have state governments, and the central government, the ministry which I represent, is trying to push for a lot of change. But we have to work with the states, because law and order is a state jurisdiction. Transport permits are issued by the state government officials. So unless we move in tandem with them, we can legislate all that we like. The police are under the control, so enforcement becomes a part of the state government's responsibilities. This year, for the first time, we identified on the basis of data, so there was no subjectivity, the state which has done the best, and they have actually done a very good job. One of the states in India has reduced fatalities by 27% in just 1 year. And how have they done it? They have integrated their whole police and emergency and transport departments, because we all tend to work in silos. Unless the system from the top forces the different departments to come together and holds all the departments equally and severally accountable for what is happening, we will continue to just, pass the buck to each other. And that is something which needs to be cut through. So that commitment was from the top in Tamil Nadu. It yielded the results. And just 3 days back in our Road Safety Week, we have awarded the state government. Naturally, it has made the other states sit up and say, okay, what can we do? Why can't we be there on the dais next year to receive the award? But they have to put in the hard work, and now they are understanding that it is possible to do it, but they have to really have a concerted strategy in place.
Go ahead.
Thank you for that. I was getting very excited because Bloomberg Philanthropies has been working in Maharashtra state. You mentioned Tamil Nadu, but in Maharashtra, primarily the Municipal Corporation of Greater Mumbai, for the last 5 years, we brought together transportation, the Municipal Commissioner's Office, the police, and we've seen a reduction, we as in MCGM has seen a reduction in road traffic fatalities by more than 22%. And that too just reinforces your comments. It really is a multi-sectoral approach, and oftentimes it's at the subnational level where we need to see the strong implementation. The national level can set those policies, but it's really the subnational level and that local leadership that will ensure effective implementation.
Thank you, Kelly. Now, we received 2 questions online. In fact, one of the questions, I think the last couple comment already responded it, which is how can we ensure our political leaders take seriously the topic of road safety and implement positive road interventions? I think your comment, in a way, responded to this question. The other question, by the way, that's a question from a lady, Laura Quintana. Didn't say where, I assume. The other question is, what would be a more realistic goal for reduction of road death by 2030 and for achieving the SDG on road safety? I think in a way, maybe Jeff, maybe since you're working on an expert group on this new declaration, what's the realistic goal?
So I think the consensus is building towards rolling the 2020 goal to 2030, a 50% reduction. And I believe that if we can realize this vision of full utilization of the 5 pillars, much broader implementation of the safe system approach, and integrating road safety with the sustainable development goals, I think that's very achievable. So I think we have a good goal, and I think we have some of the tools to do it. If I could give just one more recommendation, it would be for capacity building. We've not talked about that directly yet, and building capacity among road safety professionals, both public and private, is really important, and it is not at very high level right now. Very few road safety professionals, particularly at the local levels, are familiar with the safe system principles. They need to be. We have a lot of education to do. They need not only to be familiar with the road safety pillars and the safe system principles, they also increasingly need to be aware of the sustainable development goals and of their local political opportunities to take advantage of those. So capacity building remains, I think, central in our challenges to achieving that 50% reduction.
Thank you. I would like to go back to I think the comment or question made by a colleague from London. I'm not sure where we fully responded to your question. If I respond correctly, right, we're talking about road safety. It's not in isolation. It's not about person getting injured or crashed by vehicles, and typically we're talking about passenger vehicle, and how that link with the sort of modern mobility agenda we've been talking about in this forum as well. And I'm all with you. In a way, you can imagine if we can reduce the demand for passenger vehicle, private passenger vehicle, right, globally, I'm sure that will have impact on reducing crash and accident, crash and injury. I think I'm all with you. I think that was the discussion this morning about intermodality or multimodality, sort of moving more poor people into public transportation using space much more efficiently, but probably will achieve a better safety outcome as well. I see another gentleman waiting for a question, and this may be the last one or two questions, and then we have to close the panel. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Nayel Ureña. I work at ICF, not to be confused with IFC here at World Bank. Thank you for the panel. This has been a fantastic discussion. I want to say it was 5 years ago that I participated at a conference, and they were comparing what you could acquire monetary-wise when it comes to a vehicle, and they were using, I think it was $16,000. What you could buy a Peugeot 206. It was going to be 5 stars or 4.5 safety stars, but the same car for the same amount of money in Latin America, it was going to be a 2-star safety vehicle. So my question here is, to what degree should we, as the people, as the consumers, and the countries as regulators, be more strict about the kind of vehicles that we allow to be on our streets? It's a combination of safety for the drivers that has to meet certain requirements, that minimum thresholds, but also safety for the pedestrians. I mean, it baffles me that nowadays I still have to pay extra to get a camera to see in my back, to get those type of added safety features for identified pedestrians and all that.
Okay, thank you. Last question, if I may.
Yeah,
please.
John Wetmore, pedestrians.org. In the United States, we have the highest level of pedestrian fatalities in 2 decades. It's been going up rapidly the last several years. How does addressing that problem in the United States differ from addressing that problem in the countries where the World Bank works?
Okay. Any of our panelists want to respond to these last 2 questions? Okay. Yeah.
I think the last question was about pedestrian fatalities being higher in the US and how exactly the World Bank is trying to address it. I think in India, if I speak about India, the two-wheelers, because in India, scooters and motorcycles are extremely popular modes of transport. And they are very vulnerable because they will not wear the helmets. So user behavior has to change. While we talk about and focus on good roads, safe roads, audit of roads, which Jeff pointed out, we need to have trained cadre of professionals who can audit our roads and see how safe they are. But user behavior has to change, and we have already mandated the use of helmet in India. But what is the compliance level? You go to any city, you go to any town, and you will see people merrily driving on the scooters, neither the pillion rider nor the driver is bothering to wear the helmets. So the problem is different in different countries, which is something that I mentioned earlier on. And we cannot have a one-size-fits-all, and we will not be able to bring down the numbers. India, unfortunately, I'm very unhappy to say, is one of the largest contributors in terms of deaths arising out of road crashes. But the problem in India will be different from, the problem in any developing country. So therefore, the solution has to be different, and we need to have a much more segmented approach in how we will build it up. So we need to strengthen what JSR had mentioned. We need to strengthen cities and incentivize them to build in, the right safeguards for cities. And that same thing would not be true for a country where it is not so city-specific, where it is the crashes are happening more on the highways and motorways. So let us try and look at which are the countries which have maximum problems, what is the nature of those problems, and then the World Bank can work with the states, with the countries. We've already worked with the World Bank in trying to do around 5,000 professionals were trained over 1.5 years in India on road safety auditing. So we are making it a big drive, partnering with 10 institutes of technology all across the country, so that we can build up more and more people who are trained in road safety auditing. They will go around and the existing roads would be audited. New roads also would be designed and constructed in a way that the road safety norms are fulfilled. So the strategy has to comprise a mix of all these different things, and of course, changing user behavior, changing the behavior of our cyclists and our pedestrians and our drivers. All of it has to be done, and all together. It's a huge thing, but we have to do it to get there eventually.
Thank you. Kelly, you want to?
Go ahead.
I'll just explain to you about the star rating that you referred to. The star ratings differ from country to country. The standards are different. So when we talk about global NCAP, they have a method to do it. Euro NCAP has one. Australian NCAP is very close to Euro. What's in America is different. So all these standards are different. And there's a reason why these standards are different, is because the operating conditions for which these standards are made are quite different depending on how the vehicles are getting used. For example, in America, where the speeds are different, you cannot apply the same standards for what's in India. The second is, when you look at these NCAP protocols, you look at a series of different things. It's also about how the vehicle protects the occupants when it meets with a front crash, what happens if you have a side crash, what happens if there's a rollover, how do you protect the pedestrians, and you have some safety assist systems, and so on and so forth. And you finally get a rating based on all these parameters. So in countries, let's assume that there are no pedestrians, having pedestrian-related protocols are not relevant. I'm not saying it's so, but that's the way star ratings are done. So if you take a star rating from one country and then you take it, you extrapolate it to somewhere else, it may not be absolutely relevant. That's why you probably see this. So where does this stop? So what most countries do is, they look at their accident data, they come to a conclusion, what are those load cases on the basis of which we set up those minimum regulatory constraints based on which auto manufacturers are able to manufacture. So that is the minimum denominator based on which countries decide their safety strategy. But there are companies who can go far beyond that, and then they can probably choose for, even if I'm in India, if I want to probably protect for all those conditions, then probably I use the highest safety standards and build my car around it. But then what you do is, if you take a specific load case, you're able to cover 70%, and that may be just good enough. Okay. May not be the best, but just good enough.
Thanks.
Just quickly on pedestrians, more than half of the world's population live in cities, and I think I mentioned this earlier. City streets are designed for cars. So people are getting killed because the streets are designed for vehicles, not for bicyclists, not for pedestrians. So much of the increase in pedestrian deaths in the U.S. and in low and middle income countries is because of design. And we need to focus on designing streets for everyone. And then on the vehicle safety standards, 80% of governments do not require manufacturers to meet minimum safety standards. So as a consumer, use your voice, use your pocketbook, and really push government to require minimum safety standards, but also do your research and invest in vehicles that do meet those safety requirements, because in many countries they do. But really, it's a matter of consumer push and advocacy to governments to regulate.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we answer all the questions. I think the last comment about what World Bank can do about increasing pedestrian crash in the United States. I suppose obviously we don't really invest in the United States, but I certainly hope a knowledge sharing conference like that, this is kind of knowledge experience is not just for developing country, but also for developed country. I think those are things that we could certainly play a role to serve. Now, before I close this session, I just want to give one opportunity for each of our panelists to say one sentence. What do you want to leave with our audience on the topic of road safety? Something you want to leave behind. Just one sentence, and then we close.
I think for the next decade, in respect of the decade, there is need for more commitment towards ensuring safety of lives and property. Thank you.
Okay.
I would appeal to the car makers of India to do everything that can make India safe.
I think we have to institutionalize road safety in every aspect of our lives, right from what we are being taught in schools to what we are practicing in our daily lives, in our school, in our workplace, on the roads, and in our dialogues and conversations with people who we meet.
Evidence exists on how we can save lives. We need to match that evidence with political commitment of governments to actually invest in road safety.
I just ask all of you to please participate in this coming conference. We need ideas about how to integrate road safety with 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I think the ideas can come from here, and we need your leadership.
I think in light of how key roads are to public health now, I think we need to set and meet a new definition for what it is to be a road safety, a transport expert, which includes road safety expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. From my perspective, my one sentence, I would just want to first thank our distinguished panelists in giving us all this insight and their experience and their perspective, and of course the audience for your great participation. I'm sure this has been a really stimulating conversation, and of course the challenge is still very much ahead of us, and certainly we hope the next 10 years globally we can achieve a better outcome than the last 10 years. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know any logistical announcement? Oh, it's the coffee break now. And then we will have the next session starting at 4 o'clock. Thank you.